Hello, I'm Dr. Rosie Kuhn, and I have my little light on here. I'm going to make it a little lighter. Here we go. 1, 2. Okay. How are you? I'm looking forward to this conversation. This month, I decided to talk about narcissism because narcissism is a big subject. A big subject, and I've heard it more in the news more lately, and I've heard it from clients, and I've heard it from uh, trainees of mine who are working with clients who have issues regarding relationships with narcissistic people, or what we call narcissistic people. And so I kind of wanted to raise awareness or cultivate awareness about this big subject of narcissism, and look at it not only from the personality disorder elements of that, like I'm going to spend very little time on that, but want to really talk about how it's in our everyday life all over the place. And that it's not any more wrong or bad than other elements of life that we make wrong or bad. So, so we're going to talk about narcissism today, and the topic is the name of this is Narcissist, who me, because none of us want to own those elements or tendencies. Sorry, my nose started itching. Um, tendencies that one would call narcissistic. So, but that's the point of this conversation for this month, is that we all have tendencies of any and all of the personality disorders. Anyone who's taken an introduction to psychology and have read about personality disorders like depression or hysteria, or I always forget what to call it, but an OCD, compulsive obsession disorder. All of these elements of what's people call personality disorders, we all experience that. So again, I was saying that anyone who's taken a course in personality psychology has had the experience of it going, oh my God, that's me. Oh my God, that's me. Oh my God, that's me. And we think, oh my God, I'm crazy. I'm sick. There's something wrong with me. And the truth is that because we all have particular tendencies, then we will experience that. And if we can acknowledge it, that's a good thing. And if we can then do something about it, that's a good thing if we want to. So I want to make a couple disclaimers. I'm not making anyone wrong here in terms of that you are a narcissist. I'm not making anyone wrong here, because, like I'm saying, part of what I want to do is cultivate awareness that we all have these tendencies. We can sometimes get polarized, but we all have these tendencies. So, number one, I'm not making anyone wrong. Number two is, if these conversations bring something up in you that is challenging or emotional or perhaps even traumatizing, then I would really encourage you to talk to your therapist, or get a therapist or someone that can help you. And if it's serious enough, call 911, because we want you to get support for whatever it is that's happening for you. Okay. So this is not meant to be a diagnostic session by any means. I'm just giving you my personal experience, my professional experience, and readings that I've come across over the 40 years that I've been working with people, either as a therapist, in drug recovery, and spiritual guidance, and in transformational coaching. So that's what this is all about. So hello to you who's here. Really appreciate seeing you. If you want to, I'd love to see who's here. So in the chat, just say hello if you can. That would be great. So first of all, I want to say that narcissist, the original narcissist. Hi, Marge. Thanks for being here. The narcissist was a Greek god, and when he was young, and he was who he was, and there was this young goddess that fell in love with him, and her name was Echo, and Echo just loved Narcissist. And Narcissus was his name. He didn't feel the same way about Echo, and so he shunned her and said, "I'm not interested." Well, some goddess decided that he should be punished for that. So she put a spell on. Hi, Lissa. Nice to see you. Thanks for being here. And put a put a curse on him. So when he looked in the river, in the water, he saw his reflection and he fell in love. Oh my God. I'm so wonderful. I'm so beautiful. I'm so important. And that is when he became so in love with and enamored with himself, he didn't have the capacity for empathy or care or compassion for anyone else. And that was what happened. And then apparently, according to what I read in terms of Greek mythology, he over time got real depressed and he ended up committing suicide because he was unhappy. So that's the story of Narcissus. And from that, then the diagnostic people, psychiatrists, psychologists, created this personality disorder name, narcissist. And it reflects that part that makes oneself so important that nobody else matters. And so that's the personality disorder. That's like, I'm important. My way is the best way. My way is the only way. And it doesn't, no one else in a sense matters. And that we can go there. That goes into psychopath and sociopaths and all kinds of things over there. But that's at the far end of the spectrum where we have personality disorders. And a personality disorder is that level or that end of the continuum where people can't function really well in relationships. So there's a whole spectrum, whether it's narcissistic tendencies or depression or OCD, whatever it is, manic depressive, I always bipolar. There's this spectrum, and there's like none of that to all the above. And there's a diagnostic manual that says, here's how much somebody is of whatever. And it's either a tendency, a phase, a stage, or a full-blown, that's it, just a personality disorder. So that's sort of the spectrum. And you can go online and Google personality disorders or narcissist, and that'll all show up very easily. And so I don't really want to talk about that specifically, other just to say that we all have tendencies towards that ego part of us that wants to be the most important person in the room. And that might show up as the most important, the most beautiful, the smartest, the most athletic, the most powerful, the sexiest. All of those most elements are parts of that part that says, hey, this is the way that I feel important about myself. So we're just saying this is who most of us have a sense of, where do we get our importance? Where do we get our sense of self-importance? And or lack of self-importance. So part of this conversation too is about the fact that there are those who are more narcissistic or narcissistic in that what we consider to be arrogant or more clearly defined as the person that justifies and rationalizes and makes excuses for their behavior. They make promises. They don't mean what they say. And they say what I would say is mean what you say and say what you mean. And so people more on the spectrum this way would tend to not speak their truth. They may actually lie, but they make excuses for their behaviors, and they make excuses for breaking promises. So all of us know people like that. And in fact, I've been a person like that. That's part of part of this month is to say, hey, I was raised with a bunch of narcissists. I had a lot of narcissisticness in my family. And so part of what I wanted to do was get married and get out of there, right? And so when I found a man that was in love with me, or he loved me enough that he would marry me, that was a good thing, because now I could make him into somebody that for me was lovable. I mean, he was lovable. He was a good man. He was a kind man. He was attractive, but I wanted him to be more whatever that is. And so my intention was that my way of being was important enough that I was going to transform him into who I thought he should be. That's pretty narcissistic. And I didn't know that's what I was doing, but that's what I was doing. And the same with having children. I love children, and I wanted children because I love children. And my daughter's on, so she may be hearing this for the first time, but I think she's heard this before. That part of wanting children was that I wanted to have somebody in my life or have children in my life that I would always be important to, and that they would never leave me. They would never treat me as an insignificant person, that they would always see me as important. And well, that didn't turn out so well on many, many accounts. And I'm sure many parents have experienced this, whether they've been parents who are parents with custody or parents without custody. But quite often when we have relationships with our children, it, we don't, they do it different. We do it different. I've talked about that in previous months about families and all. So I was pretty narcissistic in my sense of self-importance, and this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. My first husband didn't like mushrooms and onions in his food, and I was like, well, I'm going to put them in anyway because that's how I like it, and I think you should like it that way. And that's that self-importance piece that I'm talking about. At the same time, I was also in a relationship with a narcissist, because we all are, that everyone has a sense of self-importance or a commitment or a way of being in the world that either aligns with us or it doesn't. And the way that we were in relationship with each other, his commitments were more for his business and his parents. And I came further down in the hierarchy of importance. That's how I felt. And quite often people, and I've heard this many times in different relationships that I've had, but it's like the person would say, "You're the most important person in my life." It's like, okay, okay, I'm the most important person. But the way that they were responding or acting or partnering with me didn't reflect those words. And I kept listening to the words as opposed to, as we said, they say in therapy, is if, watch, if you want to know what a person's thinking, watch their feet, because their actions are a reflection of their beliefs and what's really true for them. And so even though people might say, "You're the most important person," which gave me a sense of importance, it's not how he was acting in the world with me. There were other things that were always more important. And that was a pattern of mine, is to be in relationship with people who did that. And not fun for me. And it was that, oh, they're narcissists and I'm not, and poor me. But it's taken a long time for me to go, wow. In fact, my daughter is one of the people that says, "Mom, you're narcissistic." It's like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm this great, wonderful person. But she saw stuff that were where I put my self-importance above her and other people, and she was willing to call me on it. And that was a really good thing, because I respect her and I trust her that her perspective was true for her. And it's like, if that's true for somebody, then I want to look at that for myself, as opposed to disregard it and say, "You're full of poo-poo. There's nothing about me that's narcissistic." But the truth is that there's narcissistic tendencies, or that need to be self-important, to acknowledge, to prove, to express that sense of self-importance in the world. And it's part of every single one of us. And so it just, again, what I'm wanting here to do is cultivate awareness of, wow, that's a pretty big deal, that narcissism is part of everybody's life. The tendencies are, anyway, and where we put ourselves on the spectrum of narcissism in this particular case is what we do. I was going to say something. So I'm talking about all of us on this spectrum. And today I'm just kind of introducing things. The next few weeks I'll be talking about other elements of this need and desire to express a sense of self-importance in our life. It's really important. But most of us have not grown up in families where we have a sense of an ability. I'd say have the right, but have the ability to speak our truth. So those of us in dysfunctional families, and again, that's on the spectrum. But there's a point where we're not allowed to have our own feelings, our own thoughts, our own needs, and our own feelings. Needs, thoughts, feelings, and wants. Needs, wants, feelings, and thoughts. We're not allowed to have those things. And so the sense of self-importance is like, wait, I'm not allowed to think for myself. I'm not allowed to need what I need or want what I want or say what I think. My daughter, when she said, Mom, you're a narcissist, it was like, wow, that's pretty cool that she has a sense of self enough to speak the truth to me. That's pretty cool. And I really appreciate that about her. I have so many thoughts going through my head at the same time. I wanted to grab a thought, but it went that way. So, as we grow up and we go, how can I express? I know what I was going to say is um, she may have that capacity to talk to me that way in this more authentic, honest, transparent way. She may not have that ability to talk to her dad about that or her partner or her children. And it's like that's true too. Is that in some places our sense of self-importance in a sense of the arrogance sense of my I'm more important than you are kind of thing that may show up at home but not show up at work. My brother-in-law Patrick was loved at work, but he was a grumpy old guy at home, and he ended up committing suicide. This was about 15 years ago, I think. But that sense of where are we able to be transparent? Where are we able to be authentic and human? And where is that not allowed? Where do I have to um, impose my sense of importance on other people? Um, there are so we'll talk about this again throughout the month, but in a sense, there are those of us that say that those who are in power and they look powerful, they look rich, they have status, they have we think about the um, just status and all of that. We think of that having being more narcissistic, but the other element of narcissism is altruism. So the person that is always giving of their heart, of their giving of themselves, they're always doing more for others than they do for themselves. That's another form of another area or end of the spectrum of narcissism. There are people that get very, very sick as a way of saying, I'm important, take care of me. Can't you see how sick I am? Or people who are in poverty who go, you got to take care of me because I have nothing. I need you to take care of me. Those are all elements of this self-empowered way of self-importance. So that isn't to say that there aren't people that are sick and or are in poverty, but there are those that utilize those ways in order to instill a sense of self-importance. A lot of parents are use that in terms of how they are with their children and what their children are supposed to be, and what how they're supposed to be, and the same with a partner, like I talked about. The what will the neighbors think? What will other people think? What will other people think about me if I do A, B, and C? Those are all elements of those parts of us that are worried in terms of that self-importance piece from the ego. So that's all there. And so let me just look at my notes and take a glass of water because this is a big topic. Any feedback or thoughts from you guys? And I'm hoping the chat works today, so if it doesn't, let me know. Just text me if the, um, the chat doesn't work. The, I my relationships with men have been pretty much it's like I'm laughing because it's just when you so I'm 70 now, almost 70. And when you look at your whole life and you go, "Oh my God, every single person that I've been with has been pretty on the mark with a high level of narcissism." And I have to say this to you too. When I was working in recovery, someone shared with me that the ISM in like alcoholism or Catholicism or narcissism, all the ISMs in words stands for inner shit maintained. And that's to me that always made me laugh um, because it's true. It's like when we are if we are in a state of being and we do not want to change, and we have this sense of status for ourselves, even if we're in recovery programs, we go, "Oh, I still have my, I'm in recovery or I'm in whatever it is." We can have an ism attached where our inner shit is maintained and we don't want to let go of it. And this is true, I think, for a lot of people who are in relationships with narcissists. We think the narcissist should change, not me. I shouldn't change. I got to change that person because they're just not very kind, or they're inconsistent, or they're not keeping their word. It's a big part of, and I will say this a number of times, that when you break your promises, when you might break your promises for right reasons, but quite often, for instance, if you're late and you're consistently late, that's an indication that you have some element of self-importance that puts you above your commitment to other people. Thanks, Marge. She says, Marge says, "A lot of my life was shaped by what will they think. I'm working to let that go." And then she has ISM, inner shit maintained, priceless. So yeah, so many of us were brought up in families in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, still today, I'm sure it's true, where that what my mother and father's friends were about was more important than what their children were about. And so we felt a sense of insignificance. I mean, you've probably heard me say this before, as the sixth child of nine, I came to decide I was insignificant and invisible. It's like, hello. And I became very withdrawn. And when I talked, people would say, "You're mumbling. I can't hear you." And it's like, I'm talking as loud as I allow myself because I'm not actually here in the room because nobody sees me. Those kinds of dynamics are going on. And so to get to a point where it's like, okay, I'm going to get married and I'm going to make this family, and I'm going to make this house, I'm going to make this life the way it's supposed to be, where we all love each other and take care of each other. And it wasn't about that. If I'm constantly in the state of managing and controlling how people are being, that's not relationship. That's me doing that, control freak, and not pleasant for anybody around. So we're all doing that. We're all trying to manage based on our level of consciousness, our level of how do I be who I'm supposed to be. My ex-husband, he was doing the absolute best he could. He was running a business with his parents, and he had all that craziness and all the craziness of the business, and then he had me and he had children, and so he's trying to manage all of those things in his way. But how it turns out in terms of how people can be in relationship, especially because we were so young, it didn't work. I didn't have enough consciousness to do it differently. So when I hear so many people now talking about, I'm with a narcissistic partner, I really want to help people grow consciousness about what part of you is attracted to that partnership, that kind of person, that kind of identity, that kind of relationship. And I can say for me, my dad was narcissistic, and my mom was narcissistic. And so I was trying to prove that I was lovable and that I was worthy, I was significant. And I'm laughing again because, again, in my relationships with men, especially my my last marriage, which ended about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, uh, it took me a while. I didn't even see this, that I was in my mind, in my experience, I was about 17th on his list of priorities. And, when I saw, oh, that makes sense because in my family, I was way down on the list of priorities. And so it was my way of being in the world that created these relationships with people who had other things to do and other people to take care of and it's like that was perfect, made sense when I saw that's how I had created the reality that I am less significant than the older kids who needed things from my parents, and I'm less significant from the kids who are less, younger because they need their diapers changed and those kinds of things. So it's like, oh, this is how that happened. So quite often, people will say, yeah, my mom and dad were narcissists, or my boss, or my grandparents, or whoever we have a relationship with that we learned or trained ourselves to be in relationship with these people because we hadn't any choice. At 5 years old or 8 years old or 12 years old, I couldn't leave my family. So you learn to adjust, you learn to um, train yourself to live and survive. You create strategies to survive. And that's what a lot of this is we're just learning strategies that keep us alive. And then when we get older, we want to be in relationship with people and we kind of take on those same strategies. So when people say, again, coming back to that point of saying, oh, my partner's very narcissistic. And then I basically want to say, so what are you doing here? What are you doing in this relationship? What's your part in this? And this is where I suspect most people will disappear from this conversation because we don't want to hear that. What do you mean? What am I doing? My father was a narcissist, so that's how I got here, and here I am, and here he is, and he's and it's like, yeah, and this is where you are learning to see your patterns that you developed in the past, and now you can begin to shift those patterns so that you gain a sense of self-importance, not by proving to another person how important you are, but really cultivating the ability um, to be important to yourself in the right way. And that's the challenging thing. We'll talk about this and later in the month. Is like, what do you talk like? How do you, a lot of personal development work is all about learning to self-love, right? Self-appreciation and self-care. It's like, how do you do that without this sense of self-importance that we're talking about? And it has to do with whether your choices come from fear-based choices, or essence or love-based. And this can be really hard to distinguish. But a narcissistic tendency is sourced in fear. Again, if I don't say the right thing at the right time, they're gonna think something about me. If I don't have that car, that means I'm less than. If I don't have the job at the corporate, that means I'm less than. It's like, if I don't have the time, the money, the resources, the whatever that is, then I'm less than. And so 99%, I'm saying it that way because there's always that 1%, but 99% of what those tendencies come from and those strategies come from is fear. And we don't want to feel that stuff. So what we do is more of the same, in a sense that, and I think about electronics, gadgets, smartphones, all of those things, and the amount of time that people get notifications or have to be involved, that's all a narcissistic thing. It's like every time they get a ping or a notification or a buzz, it's like, ooh, I'm important. Ooh, I'm important. Ooh, I'm important. And it's like, yeah, that's what that's about. Or gaming, when we're using and we up level and we up level, and it's like, this is so good. It's is about me, right? It's all I'm important. I'm valuable. I'm doing something that makes me feel great. And if I fail at, the game, or I die or whatever, it's like, oh, I'm a nothing. I'm a nobody. I just go back to zero, basically. So we have all of these places in the world where this all gets played out. I've been watching a show called Swagger on Apple TV. It's about a 14-year-old who is NBA quality, player. It looks like he's got that kind of quality. And so he's 14 years old. And it's a really great show to watch, how in some ways he's the grooming of someone like that is always told, you're a star, you're a star, you're a star. It's like he doesn't have the capacity to see anything but that, even though his mom's saying, don't look at that stuff. Don't look at the social media stuff that either tells him he's great or tells him he's not. So she's trying to keep him humble, and this 14-year-old, while these other parts of the world are saying, you're ranked number one in in Baltimore area, or whatever it is. It's like the ranking, and he's like, oh my God, I dropped from number 1 to number 4. And he's just like, so the point is watching this show is just such a great opportunity to notice this cultivation of self-importance. He gets to a point where there's a conversation. Hello, come here. This is Gracie. He gets to, it's like he's starting to lose friends. He's starting to lose people that really cared about him, because he's becoming so enamored with himself and so self-indulgent with his own worries. I'm no longer number 1. I'm number 4. It's like, this is terrible. That people don't want to be around him. And that's a not fun place to be. I think I've probably experienced that myself, but didn't, especially with my first husband. It's like, maybe he didn't want to come home from work because I was control freak, and I was not looking to see him so much. I loved him and all that, but it was like I was doing wife. I was doing a lot of things, and I was doing the identities, but I wasn't having this true relationship with a person. So who wants to come home to that? So quite often we're creating our own challenges by not recognizing how we ourselves are contributing to the demise of a relationship, and the demise or the discomfort of it, or the way that it's not working. So these are all elements of what I'm talking about today. So what I want to share is a few things that that may be helpful. Again, I think the point of whether you're a narcissist, or whether your tendencies, am I doing self-importance based on a fear, or am I doing self-importance based on my value and my desire and my needs? So for instance, if someone says, do you want to go to the theater tonight? And I go, ooh, I don't want to go with that person, because what will people think? That's that narcissistic thing. But if I say, I don't want to go because I really just don't want to go out tonight, that's self-care, right? So both are self-importance related. One is based on, ooh, what will people think? The other is based on, I don't care what people think, because someone might say, why isn't Rosie at the theater tonight? She's supposed to be here. And that means, it's like, I don't care about that. What I care about is, this is what I want to do. I'm going to stay home tonight. So that difference is which comes from an excuse, which comes from fear, or fear-based, lack-based conversation. And sometimes you won't know that. Sometimes it's like, I didn't know. I don't, in a sense, the denial of it. Who, me? Be afraid? Why would I be afraid? I don't care what people think. Because we've heard that too from narcissistic people. I don't care what people think. It's like, okay. So that's part of it too, is being able to distinguish, and we'll talk about this more in the next couple of weeks, is distinguishing, when am I being is my self-importance coming from ego or fear? And when is my self-importance coming from a true honoring of myself? One of the things that I found really interesting when I research personality disorders and narcissism is it says, and I was looking for what's the antonym, what's the opposite of narcissism. And what it said in different articles was the opposite of narcissism is empathy. In a sense, what it's indicating is that if you're narcissistic, you don't have a capacity for empathy. You don't know how another person feels, so that you don't take that into consideration when you're ignoring, abusing, avoiding, denying, whatever that is that you're doing. You don't have a sense of saying, here's what it would be like for them, so I'm not going to do that. So empathy is a piece of that, to that stronger, again, that more extreme place. But I know a lot of people who are incredibly empathetic, and they were also highly engaged in self-importance, and where, again, as their partner person, I was way down on the list of significance. So what I realized, though, is the ability to be humble. Humility, in a sense, for me, is the antithesis or the juxtaposition. It's the opposite of narcissist, or this person that engages in high self-important, is there's not much humility. They can't experience the humanity. They're afraid of their humanity. They're afraid of humiliation. They're afraid of being nothing. And so the sort of the antidote, if you will, to narcissism or narcissistic tendencies, or those things that cultivate that self-importance piece versus truth, is, how willing are you to be honest with yourself and others? How willing are you to be accountable for your word? How willing are you to be impeccable with your word? How willing are you to say, I'm making no excuses? In fact, this is a very, very good exercise. This was extremely helpful for me, was when I went through a theater program, and one of the teachers says, there's no excuses for anything. There's no reason to have an excuse. That your word is in your impeccability. If you say you're going to be you're going to be someplace, you be there. If you say you're going to do it, you do it. There's no excuse. It's like, well, what if I forget? Forgetting is an excuse. There's too many opportunities and abilities to have reminders and dingers and buzzers and all kinds of things, and devices that speak to you, and you can speak to them and say, hey, remind me in 5 minutes to turn the rice off, or whatever it is. There's too much for forgetting to be an excuse, unless, again, if you've got dementia or those kinds of things. So there are those things, but where we make excuses for ourselves at the diminishment of another person, sorry, I'm late. How many times have you said that? I can tell you how many times I've said that, or used to say it, 462,000 times. I'm sorry, I'm late. I almost got fired from a job because I always showed up late. And it's like, why do you do that? It's a sense of self-importance is the bottom line of that. And so one way of a great indication of how it's an indication, but it's really a great practice, is how often do you tell a story to justify or rationalize, or to get away with something, or to make excuses, or to impress people? I did there's a character program called the Enneagram. And the Enneagram, number 3, if you know anything about the Enneagram, number 3 is really all about what will people think. And so in this panel discussion that I watched, the people who are 3s would, it's just admitted, it's like, yeah, if I didn't do anything on the weekend, I couldn't come to work and tell people I didn't do anything because what would they think? So I would make up stories so people would think I had a great weekend. Those kinds of things is like, how often do you make up stories or um, embellish your stories to make you look good and sound great? And those are it's just a really great beginning reminder of, am I being honest? Can I be honest? Am I afraid to be honest? A lot of times when I was training coaches in person, it and and still now, I'm pretty transparent, as you can tell. I'm telling you guys all kinds of stuff that most people wouldn't tell. But transparency is a way of saying, "Hey, I got nothing to hide here. If you like me, you like me. If you don't, you don't. And you don't have to. I don't have to try to impress you by how great a person I am, because when I do that, hello, Velta, nice to see you. When I try to impress you, I'm not being me. It's one of the reasons I'm doing these lives is to practice being me and not trying to impress you, because I'm just being me. And that can be, someone might go, "Oh my God, she's embarrassing herself." It's like, well, I'm just being me. If that's I'm not embarrassed by what I have to say. And it gives me an opportunity to really appreciate and acknowledge all the craziness that I've been through to get myself to this point of who I am in this moment. So that means there's much more appreciation, not in terms of that ego place, but really in terms of appreciating the being inside this human experience that's gone through all kinds of things, as you've heard. So, if you ask yourself, how often do you use people? So this was actually, it was a really interesting experience when I was learning to be a coach, and I was training with Hans Phillips, who's in Santa Cruz, a great guy, and he had, yeah, I get all that. Now, answer the question, like, how do you use him? And when just didn't take me long to go, well, I use them for sex. I use them for, helping me with this and that. But there were things that came up, and it was a long time ago. It was over 20 years ago, 20 years ago. But it was like, I was saying things that were manipulating and using him in ways that he hadn't agreed to. And as we are, most of us do. And I'm not saying that as an excuse. I'm just saying we do that a lot and we aren't even aware of it. And so Hans asked Todd the same question. How do you use Rosie? And so he said stuff. And it's like, wow, that's really interesting. And it was just like a really honest conversation that we were having. And I've used that with my clients many times. Like, how are you using this person? Like, why are you staying with this person if they make you so unhappy? And it's like, ooh, that's a not so good question. I don't want to answer that one. And it's like, yeah, because we're using people in ways that would indicate my self-importance comes above yours. And for the security, the stability, all kinds of things that were happening. I'm getting this notice that the internet's a little slow, so let me know how that goes for you guys. So ask yourself, how often am I using people for things that they have not agreed to, that they don't know I'm using them for? If you said, I use my partner's credit card all the time, it's like, do they know you're doing that for that particular purpose? No, I hide it from them. It's like, okay, you might want to think about that. So the other element of this process is the degree to which we can be accountable for the choices that we're making. And again, if I think one of the best practices is to say, okay, I'm not going to make any excuses. Make no excuses for yourself. Make no excuses, and and watch yourself. It was fascinating to watch myself on my way to work. I was going to be late, and I was creating justifications. Oh, I could say this, or I could say that. No, there's no traffic problems. Yeah, no, there's no accidents. No, my car is good. No, I could have gotten up 5 minutes earlier. Yeah, and and I was looking for all those reasons to justify that I was late. Now, I was a chronic late person. Okay. So how can I make up a different excuse every single day? And finally it was like, yeah, I'm not making up excuses. I'm just late. That's all there is to it. Marge says, I'm noticing your sound is cutting out a little bit. Yeah. It should come back on, I hope, because there was a message that said it was um, a little bit wonky. So let me know in the next couple of minutes, Marge, if it's still cutting out. And if it is, we'll just end a little earlier than usual. So if the opposite, so again, as a practice, if you want to, you don't have to change your life at all, but you might just look at that and go, wow, look at how I'm working so hard to create an excuse, justify and rationalize for not being accountable for what I said I would do. I made a commitment, and I'm not being accountable for that. So many times at work, people are playing games, they're reading Twitters, whatever they're doing, they're not doing their work. And so somebody comes along and it's like, okay, shut that up really quickly. We're not being accountable for our agreements. And we can justify and rationalize it, go, yeah, well, he's not a very good boss anyway, so why would I? And it's like, yeah, because you so. And really the accountability to ourselves, though we tend to project it and say, no, it's about that guy. But when we can begin to look at and notice every time we're justifying, every time we're trying to be right about something, every time we're lying to save our face, I got to look good. Whatever that is, it's a pretty big deal. And in some ways so Marge, am I still cutting out? Just let me know if I am. It's a form of addiction, this making excuses stuff. It's a form of addiction because it's so automatic that we don't even know we're doing it. We're in denial. If you say, oh, I never lie, I never tell a lie, I'll laugh because it's like, well, probably you do. Marge says, I've done justifications for things I've imagined might happen. So making up lies I may never need. Good for you. That's great. So I'm going to read that again because it's so good. I've done justifications for things I've imagined might happen. So making up lies I may never need. That's just great. So brilliant because that's true. And so those kinds of practices of where we are constantly lying to ourselves, even to the degree I have clients who are paying me big bucks to coach them, and they leave our session. They've had a wonderful session, a great session, and then they go and then they totally forget the practice areas that they agreed to. In a sense, that accountability, in a sense, goes out the window because all of a sudden something else shows up that becomes sort of the shiny object thing and gets in the way. Hi, Fred. I'm glad you're here. So that's a big deal. And what happens, generally what shows up is a sense of humiliation or humility or humbleness shows up. Because we're recognizing and admitting our humanness versus the image that we're attempting to hold on to. This is who I am. And you can sometimes see that sort of, puffing up that people do. Who, me? I would never, and I've heard it my whole life. So I can laugh about it because it's like, totally get it. I totally get what that looks like, and I totally get what that feels like. I've been on both sides of that process. And for me, working you've heard enough about my personal life, but working with clients, there's always this level of accountability for what's showing up in their life. And the way, this what I do, and if you're good at this life coaching stuff, it's about life coaching, not life coaching to get something. It's like, who are you in there? And how do you have to recognize who you are in this life, in your life, so that you can, when you recognize it and you can see it, you can go, oh, now I can change that. I didn't even know it was there. So even in beginning the processes of putting together this month of on narcissism, stuff's coming up I didn't even know was there. So I'm learning constantly. And if I don't see it, I can't fix it. If you don't see issues or patterns, and it's all patterning, it's no issues, there's no problems, there's these patterns that you've been living in forever, and you look at them and you go, wow, I've been doing that pattern. And to recognize and acknowledge it, there's no necessarily any humiliation, but that's where some of us go. That's a default in a sense. What are you afraid people will find out? And what if they find that out? I'll be humiliated. Okay. What will happen to you when you're humiliated? What will happen? And basically what happens is we become so insignificant that we feel like we will disappear. And that's what humiliation does for a lot of people, is this sense of total annihilation of self. And it's what happens. It's part of, because we exist, we have these elements that happen. And when we're afraid of those truths, we run from them and we stay in our strategies and our patterns. So it's all a matter of how much do you really want things to be different in your life? How much do you really want things different with your partnership? How much do you really want difference in terms of the quality of life that you want in your life? So for me, I'm a life coach because I'm coaching to who you be in your life as a process, not just here's what I want. I want a new car, or I want a new whatever it is, or a bigger, better, different. It's like quality life that I'm happy to live and that I'm not afraid of. I live, as many of you know, I live in a travel trailer. It's 34 feet long, and it's really beautiful. I love this. But there's a part of me that says, oh, but you should be in a house, because like a real person lives in a real house. It's like, I've gotten to a point, because I've been living in my trailer. I had one before this one, and then this one. I've been living in trailers since 2004. It's like I actually love the tiny space and I love the quality. There's some things I would like to be different, but it doesn't reflect, and it has reflected that sense of, oh, my self-importance is taking a hit because I live in this trailer. And my self-importance doesn't take a hit anymore. That's a big deal for me. And it is nice because, in a sense, when you're always living in that state of what will people think, there's a lot of angst in that. Constant. It's like, well, the dog's over there. What will people think? Or there's this or there's that. What will people think? It's like, it's a constant aggravation to your stress system, to your, and if you want peace and harmony and happiness, that's not going to work. So we're all a choice about that. All right. Any other questions that you guys have? And I know there's been lots of questions. If you've appreciated, and as you're watching this, maybe in the recorded sense, if you like this, please give me thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, and you'll get notifications of when my next live is coming up, which are generally right now Thursdays at 3:30 p.m. Pacific Daylight Standard Time, 3:30 on the Pacific Coast. So that's when you'll find me. So again, the practice areas I want for you to think about is make no excuses. I make no excuses. And watch yourself. You don't You don't have to tell people what you're doing. Just say, okay, I'm not making excuses. And then watch yourself, watch what shows up in your thinking. Like, oh, I'm not making an excuse. How am I going to justify, rationalize, you know, all that stuff, whatever that is. So kind of have fun with it because it's all fun. It's a lot of work, and it's sometimes it's really heartbreaking to be with what you're actually being with inside as you're exploring, but you're being so much more in self-honor when you can admit these patterns and these tendencies and not make yourself wrong for them. It's just you're one of us. You're one of us human beings that are trying to make the best of your life. You're trying to make your way home in a way that is growing you. And so I'm grateful, very, very grateful that you've spent as much time with me on this video as you have. So thanks for that. All right, next week I'm going to be talking about living with a narcissist. And so the title is Living with a Narcissist. We are all living with a narcissist. So we'll talk about that next week. All right. Thanks very much for being here. And if you have any comments, please leave them below, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have as well. All right. Thanks very much. Bye for now.